We did a chunk of work at the beginning of September to start working more together across many different kind of teams in the Filecoin ecosystem to talk about focus and priorities, to both align on where we're putting the majority of our energy, the classic, put more wood behind the arrows you really want to see land, and also make sure that we are effectively coordinating in kind of our fully decentralized cross-team structure to bring our huge launches for Q4 to reality. It's involved a much deeper cross-coordination between teams to bring some of the things to life that we launched at the Filecoin 5th birthday 2 days ago, and that will be coming later this quarter. And that approach has pushed us into new ways of working together across multiple different teams and organizations to kind of achieve these outcomes. And also, as we look forward into upgrade trajectories and focus on market verticals in Q1 and broader in 2026, we want to be doubling down on more kind of cross-team coordination and resourcing. We have also, we ran the first batch of Pro PGF over top of Q2 and Q3. And we have a chunk of learnings from that process as well, where we need to make sure that we're putting out information for our kind of selection committee members to harness as they are reviewing Pro PGF applications, and for teams to cross-coordinate on their roadmaps and the work they're doing ahead of making those like larger public goods funding applications, so that we end up less back and forth and more kind of shared alignment and budgets for teams that are working on kind of like integrated chunks of work. So this both talks a bit about the markets right now that we are most focused on and why, how we are organizing and spending our time. There's a draft of a Q4, early Q1 roadmap. It is very draft, so expect this to continue changing a lot. We're putting it forward here again as a forcing function for us to put wrong information on the internet and then get the response of like, hold on, that's not happening, let's make it better. And so we will be using this to iterate. Do not depend on anything in that for it to be accurate even 2 months from now. And then talking more about what we will be doing at FDS7 IRL in Barcelona as a community to help align our roadmaps, continue focusing and doubling down on the strategies that are, pushing Filecoin forward the most, and identifying and resourcing new opportunities and helping them get off the ground. So that's context for this session. I always like to start conversations about what is our roadmap, what is our focus, what is our priorities, and what is our mission, and what are we? We're a crypto-powered storage network that is core to what Filecoin is, and our mission is to create a decentralized, efficient, and robust foundation for humanity's information. If you haven't seen it, there is a great MD file on the FIPS repo since, I don't even know, sometime 2020, that talks about why each of these components in Filecoin's mission, why decentralized, what does that mean in practice, how does that show up in how Filecoin serves users and builds this two-sided marketplace for decentralized storage, why efficient, why robust, why foundation, why humanity's information. So that is a very good read to always ground ourselves in the target that we have been shooting for the past 5+ years, and what it means to achieve robustness in context. Would really recommend going and reviewing that. We've also been continuing to follow the Filecoin master plan. Step 1, build the world's largest decentralized storage network. Check. Step 2, onboard and safeguard humanity's data. Working on it. Step 3, bring compute to the data so that we can power web scale applications like decentralized edge AI training and things like that. And we are, focused on those last 2 steps. Most of our time and resources continues to go into step 2, bringing valuable data, growing a data storage business that attracts and onboards data into the Filecoin economy. There's 2-ish exabytes of data stored in Filecoin now, and continuing to grow and scale that with high value users who have really interesting and important data sets, and that will create demand for step 3 of this business is kind of the key master plan or strategy. But we are also doing foundational groundwork for step 3. So how will we bring compute to the data that is stored in Filecoin? How will AI training jobs be run? How will that interface with Filecoin storage? And how do we do that within the Filecoin ecosystem and kind of tool set and suite of tools? And how do we make that happen in a way that abides by Filecoin's overall mission of being a decentralized, efficient, robust foundation for humanity, so that our compute workloads are also decentralized, efficient, robust in their structure as well. And so a lot of the work we have been doing around the Filecoin on-chain cloud is targeting, hey, what foundational framework are we going to need to bring compute jobs into the Filecoin economy as well, and power things like AI workflows. When we talked about our priorities for 2025, the Filecoin TLDR team and ANSA put out this kind of like great overview of kind of 3 main focus areas: accelerating the conversion to paid deals, growing on-chain activity, and making Filecoin indispensable to others by bringing these kind of like high-profile users, vertical partnerships into the Filecoin economy, and did a good job defining key metrics associated with it. So checking in on those key metrics, we now have very early days data about how this on-chain paid deals are happening for the Filecoin on-chain cloud. This is all on Calibration Net, so it's very early data, but we've got some early things since launching 2 days ago, to show kind of how that network trend is starting to shift. In terms of our mainnet on-chain paid deals, which are all using F05 and POREP, we've seen a couple of spikes in data onboarding with payments around the 3 to 6 terabytes per day realm, but they haven't been sustained, and it hasn't become like a repeated growth trajectory yet. And so we're still kind of in the finding product market fit stage of bringing on-chain deals to the Filecoin economy, and bringing these foundational tools into a kind of high growth environment that is impacting kind of like Filecoin L1 value accrual. In terms of growing on-chain activity and transactions, there has been an increase in September and October, a market increase in contract transactions and in messages sent and received, which I think are related to bringing more on-chain activity to the Filecoin economy. The overall growth in like active users or active wallets, that component I think is not yet there from an FVM data on mainnet perspective. Actually, right now, almost all of our FVM data is on mainnet, whereas you'll see most devs and people building in hackathons and things using calibration. So it's an interesting insight for us. We need to do a better job of having calibration data for this activity so that we can see the leading signs of like major mainnet growth. And then in terms of bringing high value users into the ecosystem, looking at like the last year or so of data onboarding and the on-ramps that we've heard from, who are, kind of the folks who are attracting and bringing some of our major and supporting major client partnerships. We did see a huge spike with CID Gravity and Aurora in the mid-September timeframe, but overall the volume here is low and not on the growth trajectory that we want to see, because again, a lot of this is happening in kind of more either off-chain markets or living inside of on-ramp operations directly. So that's kind of the context with which we focus our Q4 energies. And so here's a view into kind of both the market verticals that a set of Filecoin PGF teams. This is not comprehensive of everyone. This is folks who got together and shared their updates and their focus and priorities. Subset of the community that's receiving kind of public goods funding from Pro PGF, Retro PGF, a number of similar funding groups, and what those teams are prioritizing in Q4. So as we looked at and gathered this data across different groups, we really identified that we're focused for sure a lot on the Web3 object storage area, really supporting Web3 builders who are creating things like, unstoppable website, trustless agents, NFTs, and the Filecoin on-ramps themselves. This is really like a building up strategy from core L1 components to then support the closest community of builders and kind of aligned partners, and then build upward, right? So, start from the bottom, build the tools you need, build the products on top of that, scale the products into even easier to use products, go into more different verticals. But if you don't have that baseline foundation, then you can't expect your top line to be deeply integrated with on-chain transactions and on-chain pay deals. So starting with the Web3 community allows us to do that activity in a way that is aligned with a user group that can help us scale that journey. And so this has been a big focus for the entire Filecoin community for the last year or so, at least 6+ months for sure. And this is where we're putting a whole ton of time and energy to build out that foundation. The other market is Web2. It kind of crosses back and forth between, there is definitely a lot of Web2 object storage within this group, but a focus within that is larger scale customers. So groups that are bringing 1 to 100 petabytes of data into the Filecoin economy, and the large data on ramps with those large scale paying customers. Think groups that are doing very large scale AI data collection jobs, folks that are doing kind of like edge data center build outs, or very, very large scale scientific or enterprise data sets. And it really is prioritizing this massive scale of data because that is one of the differentiating factors. No one else in the decentralized storage economy and in many other storage ecosystems has the scale of data and capacity that Filecoin has been designed to support from day zero. And so this is a focus on supporting those really large scale customers and building infrastructure that makes it better. So we just heard from Richard talking about kind of like this POC tooling, this sandbox to help these groups run effective proof of concepts so that they can do much larger scale data trials in the future, giving them the interfaces. A number of on-ramps have been pushing forward S3 APIs that makes this way easier from a switching perspective for these large scale enterprises. And then we heard from John yesterday talking about the large open data standards and data preparation tooling that can help us have kind of just like more canonical common metadata for how to understand public open data sets stored on Filecoin. So like large scientific data sets from SETI to CERN to whoever, so that we can do larger scale data set exploration and ease the onboarding friction for these kind of like large scale scientific communities to bring their data onto Filecoin. So that's, as we look at where we are investing our time and resources, those are the ones that we put the most energy into. That is not to say that Web2 object storage, super valuable. We do have a number of on-ramps. Kave is a great example, who are like doubling down and doing a lot of work in this area, building the Snowflake integrations and other connectors. And Web3 chain storage, we think, is also a valuable and growing area. And maybe that's kind of more a call to action to bring more kind of ecosystem capacity into the Filecoin kind of like core PGF community so that we can double down on the growth that is happening as we have, I don't even know how many like OP stack chains that are just like, generating lots more block transactions, or Solana, which is generating massive amounts of data. Making the tooling here better is an area that we would double down in more if we had the human resources and the ability to kind of shard ourselves. As of right now, we need to put our energies on the areas that need more kind of cohesive support. So as we were grading ourselves on our overall product maturity, again, holding ourselves to a high bar in terms of where we aim to be in terms of supporting these different sub-markets, we kind of identified that we had a lot of areas kind of across these that were like repeated gaps where we weren't meeting all of the product maturity requirements that we think we need. And so after Q4, we're working on getting very green as across the board for many verticals of Web3 builders. We still have a couple of areas that we aren't going to land within Q4 itself, but that we've upgraded our tool set significantly. And really, this is related to all of the work we've been doing with the on-chain cloud, Filecoin Pin, and Filecoin Beam to make retrievals just work, to make warm, hot data storage just work, and to make this much more friendly, usable, simplified for a Web3 builder context by creating that like close connection with IPFS tooling and IPFS CIDs that many Web3 builders already know and love and use all the time. And so that's kind of where the focus and attention has been from a Q4 perspective. In doing this, we kind of like started writing down what are the kind of like key focus areas from the last quarter within Q4, and then starting to look forward into early 2026 that we're focusing time on. We kind of broke those two chunks down into like that Web3 builders chunk versus that Web2 large data object storage chunk. These are kind of mixed between the two of those. In the Web3 builder side, it's been a big focus on having hot retrievable storage for Web3 builders that speaks the language of Web3 builders to help make them adopt more easily. So things like proof of data possession, having on-chain smart contracts that allow for on-chain kind of deals and direct connections with other smart contracts. Akave and Sriracha have launched a number of features that are helping folks also bring their workloads into Filecoin. So you have Web3 groups that are using S3 or folks that are using Blue Sky that are then able to onboard their data into the Filecoin ecosystem. And then there's a chunk of stuff that is just launching or launching shortly around making sure there's a strong Filecoin IPFS connection for pinning IPFS data to Filecoin and for having a kind of on-chain visibility into the storage providers that are serving the Filecoin on-chain cloud. We also, excitingly, we already have one on-ramp, Lighthouse, which announced that they are already building with PDP and Filecoin on-chain cloud on mainnet, which is very exciting. But we are working with many of the other major Filecoin on-ramps to bring their offerings into the Filecoin on-chain cloud and aiming for an end of year GA to share more here with the community and bring this into full general availability. Filecoin Beam is also a critical part of that, offering these CDN level retrievals from it within the Filecoin economy and helping us have really robust data on storage provider retrievability who's participating in the on-chain cloud so that everyone can depend on retrievable data. Another component of that is also making sure that it's robust and that we have the needed baseline replication to make sure that we have high confidence in the storage persistence within the on-chain cloud. As we start looking into Q1, things get a little bit more nebulous. We are going to literally be moving things around on this roadmap and prioritization at FDS IRL in Buenos Aires. But things that we already see as priorities on our midterm area is encryption and private access controls. We've been talking to a number of Web3 builders who are like, I want to, put all of my meeting recordings on the on-chain cloud. I want to store my private Blue Sky messages or whatever it is. And so pushing that into, systems that are going to support those users is a key priority for us. And we'd love to talk to folks about making sure that what we bake in as kind of standards and, default building blocks for everyone is aligned with, what on-ramps are doing in general so that we can have good data portability across different on-ramps and we can have kind of a shared approach for how folks can rely on Filecoin for encrypted and private data. There's also a chunk of work that we've been hearing from a number of Web3 builders, especially like larger data Web3 builders around, hey, it's really exciting to have hot retrievable data for my large scale NFT collection, but I'd really love it if my NFT collection browsers or my DPIN data purchasers are the ones that are going to pay for the bandwidth associated with retrieving data for me. So that's something that we've been actively designing and discussing with the Philbeam folks. On the Web2 object storage side, we already heard about a chunk of work that's happening around discovering, preparing, creating standards for public data sets from John. And then there's also, additional work going in to investigate and attract new large-scale scientific data sets into the Filecoin community, especially ones that are, high value for future computing style use cases. There's also a chunk of work that's happening to kind of like better operationalize and operate our markets from a large data perspective. We have the self-serve sandbox that Richard was talking about of actually creating kind of smooth onboarding flows for Web2 users. We have bringing POREP into the Filecoin on-chain cloud so that our existing Web2 users who are utilizing POREPs in Filecoin today can do so with on-chain stablecoin-based rolling deal payments instead of just the F05 market that they've gotten access to today. And then looking further along, creating this concept of a data set catalog where all of these shared and standardized metadata for on-chain open data sets can live and become browsable in a way that we can discover and kind of scale them more broadly. Beyond all of the things that we mentioned already for Q1, there's a number of things that are in our backlog. And so things that have come up in market research and are things that we would love to put more time and energy into, but don't yet have the time to push on these or scope them out or write PRDs for them today. If you have data that we should be prioritizing a chunk of these sooner, higher than things that are already on our Q1 backlog, please give feedback and input, like comments and ideas, either coming to Buenos Aires. We'll create a discussion issue so that folks can comment on this existing priority set. But also drop it in the chat. Give us feedback on kind of what should be higher priority than what's there already. On the Web3 side, a thing we know that we really want is better repair markets. We now have the tools to do really cool smart contract-based repair structures. But this is, an area that will require some design and innovation. We know of a number of different groups who are already doing erasure coding and using that in conjunction with kind of like repair and replication strategies. It's an area we're looking into. Now that we have a storage provider registry where storage providers are declaring their location as on chain, that's something where we can add different pieces of metadata, whether it's a geo proof or a kind of like KYC bit or something like that, so that we can have more location data for folks that are making on-chain deals with storage providers. Data deletion is something that continues to come up of just whether this is a technical component of like allowing you to resnap into existing POREP sectors in order to achieve demonstrated deletion, or just an easy way to burn your encryption keys and be like, it's gone, I can no longer access it, and neither can you. We can make sure that we have like a clear communicated strategy for folks that are doing compliance. Different replication strategies to hit different scales of nines of durability versus the associated cost, and being able to query data sets in that public catalog. On the Web2 side, we talked a little bit about the retrieval marketplace from a Web3 perspective, but can be also very useful for Web2 groups that want to do kind of requester pays S3 buckets. Access controls is also we should make sure that our access control solution works across both groups, and then encryption. As we're going through and doing all of this work, we have kind of lightly organized ourselves into pods, and these are kind of like orienting a group that often involves like 4 to 6 different actual companies under the hoods into a kind of shared go-to-market cohort, which includes kind of folks who are focused on product, our core engineering work associated with it, folks focused on the kind of like robustness, reliability side, and go to market, and then kind of like operations and customer success. And so kind of the 2 pods that we have staffed right now are really the Web3 pod, and then like a partial component of the Web2 large scale pod. And then we have this kind of like SP pod that is, part of the other side of the market of meeting Web3 and Web2 needs, is making sure that we have a strong baseline of service providers that match up with that client user group. And our aim across these pods is that they can share a chunk of resources as well, from coordination to research to have these like cross-functional working groups that get together, go-to-market leads or product leads or customer success leads across these different verticals to do kind of like resourcing or shared initiatives. So here's a very early version of kind of just trying to define out kind of folks that are working in some of these different pods. Pods are just a subset. Like lots of teams are working on growing Filecoin outside of these pods, but this is where we do see a lot of organizations, a lot of ecosystem teams putting time and energy into working together in kind of a very cross-functional manner to then bring a cohesive product to market within verticals. And so kind of our Web3 Builder pod has really been focused on Filecoin on-chain cloud and how that can integrate and power on-ramps in the Filecoin economy. Our Web2 pod has really been focused on like large-scale onboarding, data standards, partnerships, and starting to do more research into like feature backlog requirements. And then our service provider pod is really looking at both of these pods. What do we need to do from like a cohesive forward-looking storage provider offering that is going to allow them to serve these different user groups with great robustness and quality of service. So maybe just an example. I recognize I'm probably running over time, but just to ground what the heck is a pod, because that's always the, all right, what does it actually do? How does it actually work? And again, we're still early days, so we're iterating on this, and these are still kind of draft charters and operations. But for an example, the Web3 pod mostly is operating in public and private Slack channels on Filecoin Slack for the Filecoin on-chain cloud and FS working group. There's a set of weekly meetings that help escalate and execute work and plan go-to-market activities. And there's kind of quarterly planning work that is now being coordinated across multiple different pods at the kind of like Filecoin community level, helping recap past quarter's work and target work for the next quarter. Number of things that we care about that is how much data we're bringing in, how many clients we're onboarding in the ecosystem, especially how much fill we're able to bring into on-chain paid deals, so that we have like a total network value that is flowing through the infra we're delivering, and then kind of how that hits our payments infrastructure related to value transacted and gas fees. And this is a little draft, but we do kind of have a high level view on how pods operate. So pods generally have folks who are helping, lead and execute on decisions like, how are we going to operate this? How can we allocate resources to make things happen? There's a draft pod charter, which is this document that kind of defines how communities operate. There's structures to join a pod, jump into the Phil-FOC Slack channel, be like, hey, I have opportunity or time to contribute here, be able to start picking up items as you kind of grow your participation, can start attending regular meetings and becoming a full-fledged member or component of a pod. Slack channels are probably the best way to coordinate around that. And so if you are creating a new pod, create a Slack channel where new people can get involved and coordinate on that shared activity. You can also use that Slack channel to propose new focus areas for a pod. Obviously, pods are busy, and so they might not take your feedback, but feedback is welcome to highlight like, hey, here are considerations to add to the backlog for this pod. Obviously, if you're able to join the pod, then you get to have a lot more input on the focus areas that pod takes on. But using those Slack channels to coordinate with stakeholders, and then maybe even scaling that up to planning meetings or budget and resourcing on how pods work. And last but not least, a component of what we're excited to do with these pods is, instead of having all our network good public good funding mechanisms flow to an individual team, when we have teams that are working together in a pod structure to bring those shared roadmap proposals into a single funding proposal, which can then flow into something like ProPGF to cohesively fund a community of contributors across maybe a number of different companies in working on those pod roadmaps. That work can also then have longer term input on even individual funding proposals where those individual teams are working towards pod outcomes. So an example of this is right now, Philby, Curio, Space Meridian, and a number of other groups are all working together on the Web3 pod, all have different grants from ProPGF to push forward specific components, but our actual day-to-day work needs to be in coordination with each other on how do we bring a shared product to market, having that component of our work go through kind of more shared funding, or at the very least have leadership stakeholders from a pod perspective involved in public good funding evaluations or milestone reviews. Roadmaps change. We need ways to make sure that our funding is going towards what we know is valuable today instead of what we thought was valuable like 3 to 6 months ago. And so, this is not the only way that things will get funded, but it's a new pathway that I think we're going to be trialing for batch 2 of ProPGF to try and simplify the application and execution around this. Just maybe a flow of how we can best prepare ourselves to keep iterating on the go-to-market trajectory here, and like making sure that we bring proposals into funding that are kind of well qualified and have data. Where we use these terms a good bit. This is not something that we follow in a rigid sort of approach, but it is something that is very common across industry. First, you look at the world and understand what needs to exist out there. Then you write down the requirements of like how that thing needs to work. Then you actually write down what you're going to build. Then you build it, you launch it, and then you make sure that it stays online and functional. And this is a general structured approach for doing kind of iterative improvements in an ecosystem. We do not follow this rigorously today. It is something that we're trying to lean into more as we've invested in more product resources to write down our understanding of market context and product requirement documents so that we can better scope the work that we're going to achieve and the value we expect to create through it. And so we've fed this into a roadmap that we're tracking, which is scoping a number of PRDs for critical areas, from making sure that we have robust uploading through the on-chain cloud, retrieval, payments, but also new areas like, hey, how are we going to do large-scale scientific data sets? This is doing more market research before writing PRDs. And so this was turned into a kind of Q4 and an ongoing picture of both research and then development work that we aim to do as an ecosystem, so that when we go into funding presentations or make proposals to things like ProPGF, there's data on potential market needs and a robust PRD that we can scope and size and then decide whether or not to fund. So the nudge and the ask around this is where we have PRDs that we aim to get funded in the early Q1 2026 timeframe. Bringing those PRDs to the PhilDev Summit will allow us to scope those PRDs together, align roadmaps, and then where valid, we can have pods kind of raise their hand and bring those proposals kind of into our funding pathways. Where things are separate, like great, awesome, those can still be independent proposals, but pushing more of our work to get written down and in a place where there's community transparency into the work that's being created, and we have enough context and have done our homework so that we know what we're building at the time that we're kind of applying for funding to build it. So yeah, maybe I think I already talked to this a bit, but like, aim is to use the IRL sessions of FDS so that ahead of this, we actually structure and write down our MRDs or PRDs that we want to discuss. We're able to review those ahead of FDS and maybe set high level ideas of what our team roadmaps will be so that when we're at PhilDev Summit, we can kind of like scope those PRDs, have our pods get together to talk about pod level priorities and roadmaps, and then flow that into having pod roadmaps and priorities, pod budget requests. Our batch 2 of ProPGF is kicking off in early November and running through most of December. So things that we workshop during FDS in the middle of November can then flow into a full proposal. To support that, there will be a kind of pod oriented track in ProPGF, so that teams can apply as a consortium to unlock a roadmap of a number of different PRDs that they're taking on. Cool. Well, that is the high level. I guess the call to action there is if you had signed up for some of these PRDs in the quarterly business review document, make sure that you're able to bring them to PhilDev Summit. And if you are part of one of the pods that we highlighted, coming into FDS with a draft idea of what you plan to take on beyond FDS will give us an opportunity as a community to workshop that, gain visibility and alignment across selection committee members, and hopefully avoid a chunk of back and forth in our batch 2 ProPGF funding process. Hopefully we emerge with it all figured out and a great roadmap for Q1 that's going to upgrade this draft one into something that's really robust and that we can use to coordinate as an ecosystem. Awesome. That is it for me.